Ethan Granger had seen death before, but never in this shape. A coarse burlap sack lay torn in the dust near his boots, its contents spilling out beneath the ruthless New Mexico sun. 5 pairs of children's shoes, tiny, scraped, worn down by miles of running. Around them lay scraps of little shirts, a doll missing its head, and a school primer with pages stuck together by dried blood, dark as rusted iron. The smell drifted faint but undeniable, that sharp copper tang that didn't belong in open air. The sack was heavy, far too heavy for the slight woman who had dragged it this far. She'd stumbled only as far as the yard gate before crumpling, face lost under a crust of dirt and sunburn. Her lips were split, her breathing shallow, her palms raw where rope had bitten into them. Not one word left her mouth before she sagged unconscious, not even her own name. It was the summer of 1884, the kind of dry heat that could blister your skin before noon and finish a man by sundown if he strayed without water. Ethan had worked this land his entire life, driving cattle, patching fences, burying friends. Out here you learned how to endure, but you also learned that some dangers were darker than drought or rattlers. Dangers that wore a man's face. His eyes drifted back to the dust. Nestled among the shoes was a faded photograph. 6 children smiling beneath a tall cottonwood tree. But there were only 5 pairs of shoes. The cicadas screamed in the stillness. Ethan felt the heat pressing down heavier than the sack itself. Trouble had walked up to his porch, and it wasn't leaving without a fight. Somewhere out there, a story waited to be uncovered, and he already knew it was too late to stop it. When Ethan carried her inside, the woman weighed no more than a bundle of straw. Yet the sack she had brought sat heavy in his mind. He laid her across the torn leather couch he kept meaning to mend, and fetched a tin cup of water. She sipped in trembling swallows, as if each drop was borrowed time. Ethan had plenty of questions, but out here you learned not to push. Folks talked when they were ready, and sometimes what they shared turned a good night's rest into weeks of bad dreams. Near sundown, her eyes opened wide enough to meet his. She stared at the ceiling first, then at him, as though trying to recognize his face. Ethan leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "What happened out there, Mum?" he asked, softly, the way you do when you're not sure if the answer will stir rage or dread. Her throat worked like every word cut on its way out. Finally, she whispered, "Just one, run." It wasn't loud, but it didn't have to be. That word carried more weight than the sack itself. Run from who, Ethan wondered. But she had already turned her head, eyes shutting once more. Exhaustion or fear, he couldn't tell. That night, the desert was too still. No coyotes calling, no wind through the mesquite, not even the creak of the windmill. Silence like that always meant something was wrong. Ethan sat by the window with his rifle across his knees, watching the dark. His thoughts circled back to the sack, the shoes, the photograph, and the one missing pair. Men like Ethan didn't go looking for trouble, but trouble always found its way, and when it did, you faced it or it swallowed you whole. In the far distance, a faint glow flickered, a lantern maybe, or a campfire crawling along the ridge. He thought about that word again, run. Only question was, did she mean it for herself or for him too? Morning dragged in heavy, the kind where the heat pressed on you even before the sun cleared the bluffs. Ethan stepped out to the porch, boots crunching the dry dirt. He spotted it instantly. Hoof prints. Not just from his own mare, several more. They circled near the barn, crossed, then bent west toward the open range. Whoever had been here last night hadn't come to chat. He crouched low. The ground told its tale plain enough. At least 4 riders, maybe 5, big men on heavy horses. They hadn't bothered to cover their trail. That meant either they didn't care who noticed, or they wanted him to follow. Back inside, the woman sat upright, hair loose around her face, eyes locked on nothing. Ethan set down cornbread and coffee. She took it, though her hand trembled so bad he thought the cup might snap. "They know you're here," she finally murmured, voice flat, like she'd already accepted the end.
Ethan said nothing at first. He was thinking about the tracks, the missing mare, and the fact that men who rode this far onto his land weren't just passing by. He glanced at his rifle leaning against the wall, then back at her. "I don't plan on making it easy for 'em," he muttered. She gave a faint, humorless smile. "You won't, but they'll still come." Outside, a hawk screamed high above, circling something unseen. The land itself felt tight, like it held its breath. Trouble was near now. Ethan could feel it in the soles of his boots. And if you've ever lived in the desert, you know when trouble comes, it usually brings friends. Something shifted at the edge of his sight. A shadow slipped past the barn window. He turned quick, rifle half raised. The yard looked empty. Only the windmill groaned once and fell still. If you're still here, still listening, let me pause for a second, because if this story already has you hooked, if you're feeling that heat, that silence, that danger pressing in, stick with me. There's more coming, and it's about to get a whole lot rougher. Go ahead and subscribe to this channel, like this video, and drop a comment so you don't miss what happens when those men finally step into Ethan's yard. By mid-afternoon, the heat wrapped the land like a soaked blanket. Ethan stayed near the porch, eyes scanning the horizon. He knew they were out there. Men who ride that close don't just vanish. At first, only a speck showed, then 2, then 4 riders. They came slow, deliberate, like they wanted him to see. Some men enjoy stretching the fear before they bite. Ethan stepped inside, checked the rifle, then looked at the woman. "Stay low," he told her. She shook her head, stubbornness flashing. "I've been low long enough." The riders halted 100 yards out. One slid from his horse, a tall figure with a black hat pulled low. He cupped his hands, his voice rolling easy across the dry air. "We're here for what's ours, Granger. Best hand it over." Ethan didn't answer. He leaned against the porch post, rifle resting loose in his grip. The man grinned like Ethan had just invited the fight. He signaled, and 2 riders split wide toward the barn. Ethan's shot cracked first, a puff of dust rising at a rider's boot. The horse danced sideways, the man cursed. Ethan chambered another round. "I don't recall inviting company," he called loud enough for all to hear. For a heartbeat, nobody moved. The sun beat down, the woman's breathing was loud behind him. Then the black-hatted rider turned his horse, the others trailing slow. They rode back the way they'd come. But Ethan knew it wasn't over. Men like that never just tip their hats and leave. That night, the desert held its breath again. Ethan sat oiling his rifle, while the woman carefully folded the scraps from the sack, as though the children who owned them might return. She gave her name in pieces, Mara. Between long silences, she spoke of the children in the photograph, 5 taken, 1 gone forever, and the riders who had stolen her life. They were the same men who had come to his yard. At dawn, both were ready. What followed wasn't some dime novel duel, it was faster, harsher. The riders stormed in, counting on fear to finish the work. But fear doesn't weigh much against folks who have already lost too much. Gunfire cracked, dust flew. Mara's rifle from the barn dropped one man before Ethan could even swing his. He fired back, quick, sharp. By the time silence returned, the threat was gone. They found 3 of the missing children locked in a rotting shed behind an abandoned mining camp. The rest would take longer to recover. But some roads are worth walking, no matter how far they run. Weeks later, the ranch felt alive. Children's laughter mixed with the creak of the windmill. Mara stayed on, mending fences with Ethan and teaching the little ones to ride. Somewhere along the line, what began as 2 survivors became something steadier. Not romance spun from fairy tales, but a quiet trust under the same vast sky. The burlap sack still hung above the fireplace, not as a prize, but as a reminder that silence is the true enemy of justice, that sometimes you stand not because you'll surely win, but because someone must. So let me leave you with this. When trouble knocks at your door, do you hide or do you meet it head on? And if you knew standing your ground might cost you everything, would you still pick up the rifle? If this story touched you, if you felt the dust and the fire of it, hit like, share it with someone who loves a good Western, and subscribe to this channel so you don't miss the next ride. Out here, there's always another story on the horizon. And one more thing. Your support keeps these stories alive. Drop a comment, let me know what you think, and help this channel grow. Together, we keep the spirit of the frontier burning.